In the heart of the American West, there's a river that's played a massive role in literally shaping a large portion of the United States. For decades, this river has helped build cities, carve canyons, and give life to the surrounding deserts. But over the years, this river was dammed, diverted, and exploited until one day, it simply stopped reaching the ocean. This is the Colorado River, or at least whatever's left of it. To better understand why the Colorado River is dying, we need to know the complete story. And the best place to start? It's right here, high in the Rocky Mountains, at a place called the La Poudre Pass in northern Colorado. In winter, the mountains are buried in deep snow, and as the season turns, the snow starts to melt. Bit by bit, the water trickles down, feeding small streams that wind through forest and slide over rocky ground. These streams join together to form the start of the Colorado River. From there, the river gains momentum. It flows down steep mountain slopes, through deep valleys, and into wide open basins. Then it cuts right across the deserts of the American Southwest, through red rock canyons and sun-scorched plains. The river nearly travels 1,500 miles, passing through 7 U.S. states and parts of northern Mexico before emptying into the Gulf of California. But the Colorado River has always been more than just water. Over millions of years, it helped shape the very bones of the West, carving out the Grand Canyon, feeding vast wetlands, and bringing life to cities like Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. It painted a green ribbon across a desert that would otherwise be dry, cracked, and empty. And for the indigenous tribes who've lived along its banks for centuries, like the Havasupai, Mojave, Cocopah, and Quechan, this river was sacred, a force that shaped not only the land, but their identity, their traditions, and their future. But what went wrong with this river didn't start with a drought. It started with a promise. In 1922, representatives from the 7 American states through which the river runs sat down to negotiate. They wanted to divide the Colorado River like slices of a pie, each state hungry for farmland, booming cities, and endless growth. And the result was the Colorado River Compact, a historic, legally binding agreement designed to split up the river's water. On paper, it seemed fair. Every state got a share. But there was one huge problem. The math was based on a lie, not intentional, but a dangerous one. The deal was signed during an unusually wet period. Rainfall was high, snowpacks were thick, and the rivers ran full. Nobody questioned if this abundance was going to last. And it didn't. From the very beginning, they were promising more water than the river could actually deliver. But instead of slowing down, the American West kept pushing forward. On paper, the Colorado River was expected to deliver 5 trillion gallons of water each year, divided among 7 states to feed millions of people, irrigate farms, and keep the entire system running. But today, the river averages closer to 4 trillion gallons. That missing 1 trillion gallons of water represents the water that never shows up, yet it's still expected to. And it all began with the dams, starting with the Laguna Diversion Dam, the first ever dam built on the river back in 1909. Then came the most iconic dam of all, the Hoover Dam. Built in the 1930s during the Great Depression, it towered 726 feet above the canyon floor, one of the largest engineering feats of its time. It held back the Colorado River to create Lake Mead, the biggest reservoir in the United States. But that ambition came with a cost. The dam slowed the river, and it no longer moved with the seasons. It moved on human command. And Hoover Dam wasn't the only one. More dams followed, most notably the Glen Canyon Dam upriver, which created Lake Powell. Others like Davis, Imperial Dams, and Parker helped regulate the flow even further, diverting water to cities and farms across the Southwest. With every wall of concrete, the river's flow became more fragmented, more regulated, and more fragile. Then came the cities. Las Vegas lighting up the desert, Phoenix sprawling across arid land, and Los Angeles stretching farther and farther from the coast. Every street, every pool, every fountain was built on the idea that this river would always be there, And after the cities came the farms. Vast fields of lettuce, alfalfa, and cotton, pulled to life from bone-dry ground by canals and irrigation ditches that stretched for hundreds of miles, all of it running on borrowed water. But behind all the agricultural growth is an outdated system that encourages waste, even when the water isn't needed. In much of the American West, water is still governed by outdated laws built on the idea of use it or lose it. If a farmer doesn't use their full water quota, even if they don't need it, they risk losing those rights. So fields are often flooded just to prove that the water was used. And one of the most visible consequences of this waste is the Salton Sea. It was supposed to be a dry lake bed, just an empty basin in the California desert. But for decades, it's been kept alive by agricultural runoff from nearby farms. As you can see, the river was being squeezed from every side, but nature wasn't making more of it. Then came global warming. Snowpacks in the Rockies began to shrink, and without snow, there was no melt, and without melt, there was no river. Today, two of the river's biggest reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, are sinking lower than ever before. You can see the bathtub ring on the canyon walls, marking where the water used to be. It's not just a line, it's a warning. Because now, a century after that fateful agreement, the American Southwest is facing a reality it cannot escape. The river that built everything might not survive this century. However, the farms simply kept growing. Across the valleys of Arizona and the sun-baked stretches of Southern California, fields of alfalfa and lettuce kept turning green. Cotton rows stretched for miles, all of it fed by a river that was already starting to run thin. And when the surface water began to drop, we didn't slow down, we just dug deeper. Pipes were pushed into the earth to reach ancient water, trapped in aquifers that have been filling drop by drop for thousands of years. Water so old it had never seen the light of day, and yet we pulled it up like it would last forever. But the river still kept going, trying to serve everyone. Today, nearly 40 million people depend on it, carrying not just water, but the weight of entire cities, millions of acres of farmland, and economies built on the promise that the river would always be enough. But the same river is breaking. Native fish are disappearing. Algae is spreading in places where the flow has slowed to a crawl. Wetlands that once burst with life are now cracked and quiet. And the birds that used to follow the river down for winter, many of them just stopped coming. The harsh reality is we've taken too much for too long, and now the cracks are showing everywhere. This is Sonora, the very end of the Colorado River's long journey south, a place where, for millions of years, the river met the sea. But today, it looks like this. An empty stretch of desert, cracked and dry. But it wasn't always like this. This used to be one of the richest ecosystems in North America. A wild green maze of cottonwoods and willows, with birds nesting overhead and fish swimming through water so clear you could see the riverbed. But when the water stopped coming, everything disappeared. The trees died, the fish vanished, and the birds left. Yet, something remarkable is happening. Over the last decade, environmental groups, local farmers, and tribal leaders from both sides of the border have been working together to bring this place back. Through binational agreements, they've secured carefully timed water releases. These tiny pulses mimic the floods of the past that once came naturally, just enough to let the soil breathe life back into the land. And against all odds, it's working. Trees are coming back along the riverbanks. Birds are returning to nest in trees that haven't seen any life in decades. And fish are moving through small restored pools. Because for years, many believed that this dry, cracked land was its natural state, that nothing could grow here again. But that just wasn't true. All it took was a little water and a lot of care. For farmers, for indigenous communities, and for the locals who've lived with this river for generations, this work is about more than recovery. It's about healing something that was taken. It's about restoring the balance, not just with the land, but with the river itself. Because for far too long, the American West was built on one idea: growth. build bigger, go farther, and use more resources. They assumed that the river would eventually catch up, but now that illusion has almost cracked. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are hitting record lows. Farmers are facing impossible choices. Cities are running out of backup plans. And slowly, a different mindset is starting to take hold. In Phoenix, Las Vegas, and parts of Southern California, cities are beginning to recycle water on a massive scale. Farmers are also turning to smarter tools such as drip irrigation, crop switching, and even getting paid to leave fields fallow. And in the places where the river once ran dry, people are working to bring back wetlands to help the land hold water again. But the most powerful change of all, the return of tribal leadership. For the first time in generations, indigenous tribes are being recognized, not just for the water rights they hold, but for the knowledge they carry, bringing forward generations of knowledge that sees the river not as a machine to control, but as a living system to live with. The path forward will be slow, hard, and full of compromises. Because if we've learned anything from what happened with the Klamath River, it's this: rivers can come back, nature remembers, and if we give it even the smallest chance, it will return. And maybe, just maybe, the Colorado can become one of the greatest comeback stories in American history.